This is not a regularly scheduled meeting. This is a special meeting of the Waterville City Council. There are agendas available on the city website. All items appearing on the consent agenda are voted on in one motion and vote. Generally, these items are routine in nature and do not require discussion. All items listed under unfinished business or new business are voted on separately. First, councilors will be given an opportunity for questions or comments. Once all councilors have had an opportunity to speak, citizens will be given an opportunity for comments or questions. Citizens must identify themselves. Each citizen will be allowed one opportunity to speak and will be limited to 3 minutes. Finally, the city councilors will be given another opportunity to speak or comment. Citizens who would like to speak on a topic that does not appear on tonight's agenda will have an opportunity to do so at the end of the meeting under the public comments section of the agenda if we have one. This meeting is being held as a Zoom webinar, which provides audio and video permissions only to panelists. Attendees who have registered to participate can see and hear panelists who will not be seen or heard unless recognized by the mayor. Attendees who wish to be recognized should raise their virtual hand. Once recognized, attendees will be reassigned with panelist capabilities. During this process, your permission will be reset, and it may appear as if your connection is lost, but it is not. Once attendees are finished speaking, their permissions will be returned to the attendee status. All right. Pledge of Allegiance. Everybody look at Rick. Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. See where this agenda went. All right. Any conflict of interest? Disclosure of conflict of interest? Anybody? Not seeing any?
I can only see the top of your head, Jay.
Oh, how about now?
There you go.
Sorry.
Not that I want to see your entire face, but
I mean, it's cool. Moving on to resolution 150. Oh, actually, our consent agenda.
There is no consent agenda.
Done deal. Moving on to new business, resolution 151, 2021.
A resolution providing for declaring an emergency to preserve the public health and safety. Whereas the city council will not have passed a budget for fiscal year 21-22 by July 1, 2021. And whereas there is no spending authority for city and school department operations after July 1, 2021. And whereas certain city functions are essential in preserving the health and safety of the city's residents, now therefore be it resolved that an emergency exists as defined in Article 4, Section 9 of the city charter.
Move to adopt.
second.
Can't hear you.
Councilor Foss.
I'll make an amendment, move an amendment to correct July 1st, 2019 to 2021 for sake of clarity.
Thank you.
Second.
Can I get a roll call on that amendment?
Yes. Council Morris is muted.
Yes.
Councilor Oliveira.
Yes.
Councilor Klepak.
Yeah.
Councilor Green.
Yes.
Councilor Foss.
Yes.
Councilor Frankie.
Yes.
Councilor Thomas.
Yes.
Vote is 7 in favor and 0 opposed.
Councilor Foss.
I'm hoping that the city manager could enlighten us as to why we are not voting on a budget tonight and voting on emergency spending orders.
You're muted, Steve.
We can't hear you, Steve.
That is the case because the state has not settled on its final numbers, and as a result, we do not know what our state revenue sharing is going to be for next year. And there are other measures that the state legislature is contemplating having to do with other shared revenues to the cities, and they haven't taken any votes, so we can't act on this budget without knowing what those numbers are.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
We will need a motion to move this as amended.
So moved.
Second.
All right, can I get a roll call, Patty?
Council Morris,
Yes.
Council Olivera,
Yes.
Council Klepak,
Yes.
Council Green,
Yes.
Council Foss,
Yes.
Council Frankie,
Yes.
Council Thomas.
Yes.
The vote is 7 in favor and 0 opposed.
All right, Patty. Moving on to Order 152, 2021.
An order providing for emergency funding for city and school operations. Whereas the City Council in Resolution 151-2021 declared that an emergency exists as defined in Article 4, Section 9 of the City Charter, now therefore be it hereby ordered by the Waterville City Council acting as the municipal officers that spending authority from July 1, 2021 is authorized until such time as a new city budget is approved with said funding levels to be as provided for in the 2021-2022 fiscal year budget.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Any discuss, Claude?
Is there a second? I'm sorry.
I seconded.
Okay, thank you.
Just as a matter of clarification, how can we set the funding at the 2021-2022 budget? Because if that's something that we haven't passed yet. Wouldn't it make more sense to keep the funding at the
The
current?
2021. Yeah.
Yes. I realized that as I read it, and I think I probably saw the fiscal year in there and changed it for moving along.
Want to add that as an amendment, Claude?
Yes.
Yes, please.
I'll
Yes.
second that.
Can I get a roll call on the amendment, Patty?
Council Morris,
Yes.
Council Olivera,
Yes.
Council Klepak,
Yeah.
Council Green,
Yes.
Council Foss,
Yes.
Council Frankie,
Yes.
Council Thomas.
Yes.
The vote is 7 in favor and 0 opposed.
Move as amended.
Second.
Patty, can I get a roll call on that?
Council Morris,
Yes.
Council Olivera,
Yes.
Council Klepak,
Yes.
Council Green,
Yes.
Council Foss,
Yes.
Council Frankie,
Yes.
Council Thomas.
Yes.
The vote is 7 in favor and 0 opposed.
I don't see the other ones in front. So we have nothing else. Steve, we got the budget. Do we have a?
Just a discussion about the budget, Jay. That's it.
All right. So I've got nothing else on this. That's the end of that. Let's have a general budget discussion, folks. Steve, you want to lead us?
I am ready. What I would like you to do is I can either share the page that I'm going to talk about with you, or
I think that's best, Steve, so the public can see it as well.
okay. Let me just get to the one I want to talk about. Okay. Can you see that? Okay. I can't, but you can. This is a summary of the entire budget. And what we've done here is, starting up in the left-hand corner, we've shown the calculation of the gross tax levy at the current mill rate to be $19,080,000, $81,000, call it. We've taken away from that the set aside for TIF revenue, which has to be used for certain purposes and not just for the general use of the city. That amount is $1.5 million. It leaves us with what we've called a net levy, or the levy that's available to be applied to the total costs of operating the city. That's $17,496,000, and I believe that tracks pretty accurately and consistently with previous tax levies as you've seen them. We've taken away from that amount the total of all costs that we applied to the levy at $17,000,001, and as a result, we have an available amount in excess of the levy. In excess of costs of $313,000. Think of it as a surplus of $313,000. What you see below is an analysis or an allocation of funding sources to all the various costs that the city and the schools have indicated are part of the budget. The top number here is $46,342,000. That's the total of all operating costs and non-operating costs. Our non-operating costs include the capital improvements, which are zero for this year because they're all being put into a bond. The CEA payments back to the property owners in 3 or 4 TIFs total $336,000. The county tax is $858,000. Outside agencies is $100,000. You remember working with that. Debt service is $2.1 million. And then we have sort of a balancing, not a balancing number, but an unassigned revenue here, which is this $56,000 that you see out right here is the reimbursement from KRTD. Is that the right initials? Yeah. From First Park.
KRDA, I think.
KRDA, thank you. Then we get down to the total operating costs of $42,000,008. The city's operating costs are $16,800, and the school's operating costs are $26 million. All the city departments are listed here with their total operating costs, as we've seen coming out of the detail of the budget. And then when we go back to the top of the page, we've identified funding sources so that you can see what money we're applying or what revenue we're applying toward what costs. The department revenue is in the first gray column, and overall it totals $3.5 million, of which $2.5 million is the city's operating revenue, and $1 million is the school's operating revenue. The next column over is TIF revenue, and the total available to us for use this year is $1.635 million, which includes the first number that you see down here, the $336,000 that's being paid out to the TIF property owners. So in the non-operating cost area, we're using $929,000 worth of TIF revenue, $336,000 to the TIF property owners, $100,000 to cover the outside agency costs, and then $493,000 to cover debt service. When we come down to the operating costs, this total for the city is $686,000. That covers a variety of different positions in different departments, as well as other operating costs in those departments. And they're listed right here in this column. We get down to the school department, and we have $20,000 in TIF revenue that's being applied to the school budget as well. That's coming from one of the housing TIFs, which specifies that the The balance after this CEA is supposed to go to the school operations. The next column over is the state revenue sharing, and we tried to simplify this by applying, by using the $2.7 million. And we've included in that we're paying for the county tax right here at 858, and then we're paying 1.6 million toward debt service. And then $153,000 is being applied to the administration budget. Next column over is the intergovernmental revenue. That's a variety of different things, including the reimbursement from for health and welfare, I believe. Oops, wrong column. I don't remember exactly what these things are, but we've applied, we put in the first park return.
That would be like excise taxes and homestead exemption, I believe, Steve, would be in.
Yeah, you're right, Eric, because we've charged that off against assessing. We've got money in here for the cemetery. That was for the veterans reimbursement. Information technology, that's another reimbursement. And then we get down into the excise tax, and we split that evenly between police and fire. And then I think that's in public works also. The excise tax number is a pretty big number. The other non-operating revenues totaling $2.8 million. That includes money that we've used for the city clerk, and I believe that is, I'm sorry, I don't remember what these numbers are. We've applied it also to the finance department, also to Parks and Rec, and then $1 million toward the police department, and another $1 million toward public works. Then over in the school, state school subsidies, that's just one number that came from the school department, the $15.9 million at the bottom. And then on the fund balance, the finance committee has recommended using $750,000 in fund balance. And as a result, we have a total non-levy revenue of $29,159,000. And then when we take the revenue that we would use from the tax levy, we add to that the $17,183,000 that we got from the top of the page here, right here, and it totals the $46,342,000 that you see right here. I apologize for not remembering all the detail as to what these numbers, where these numbers actually came from that we applied, but everything totals up just fine, and I can send you the spreadsheet that has all the notation columns to the right of these numbers so you can see what they are. When you come over to the right, we have just a quick summary of the budget that shows how the large numbers come together. We have total revenue, we have total costs here of $46,342, made up of the city and the school costs, and then the total revenue of $46,656. You compare those two, and it results in a $313,000 surplus. And remember here, we're using negative numbers for revenue and positive numbers for costs. So this negative 313 is actually a surplus. You can see the different categories of revenue down here. This was all in an effort to match up with the way the assessing department calculates its numbers. And what we see down below is just a different arrangement of the numbers, but with the same results. And this compares, right here, it compares the shortfall from the numbers below, the total cost less the revenue without the tax levy. And then we end up with a $17,183,000 shortfall, to which we apply $17,496,000 in tax levy revenue. And we end up again with the surplus of $313,000. That's the overview. I'll happily answer any questions. And if you, whoop, can you see that?
I can. Everybody have their hands up. Who had their hand up?
Rick
All right,
has his
so
hand up.
I'm going to go with Clepak, then Rick.
Well, I'm not going to ask any of the like deeper questions at the moment. I'm sure the other counselors will get in there, but I just had a brief question. So, of clarification, the surplus of $313,000. This is the money that we still have to sort of play with what is not yet in the budget, or what could be added potentially to the budget. And a follow-up, that number will change when we have firmer numbers from the state.
Both of those statements are correct, except I wouldn't use the word play with.
Well, right, okay, sure.
Well, and I would just point out, the budget includes $750,000 in fund balance use, which is what gives us the $313,000 surplus. So you should deduct that 313 from the 750. So our real use of fund balance, if we had a balanced budget, would be
Like 450.
more like 437.
Right.
And so a budget with zero surplus left over would be using $450,000 worth of fund balance. So anything we want to fund above and beyond that either has to come out of more surplus or some of these additional revenues that are still possibly sitting out there. So that's just for clarification.
So the ideal being that we're going to get additional revenue streams, and that we could even potentially use less of that fund balance.
Right, and the reason that we came up with that 750 number, because last year we budgeted I believe it was $534,000 in
That's correct.
surplus use, and we figured the 53rd payroll week and the staff payroll study, which is another 50,000. Those two things are sort of one-time expenses. So there was a justification for using surplus to pay for those things, which is what brought. So basically, it's the 187 for the 53rd week, the 50 for the payroll study. Add that to the 530 we used last year, and we rounded it to 750,000, and that was the justification for putting that number in the budget.
Now, one of the things that the budget doesn't consider is that we've realized $600,000 in state revenue sharing that we didn't anticipate for fiscal 21. And the Finance Committee has recommended that roll over into the fund balance.
Rick.
So on one of your budget sheets, we're talking about the additional 3 EMTs, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Anybody can correct me if I'm seeing those numbers wrong.
Nope, they're in there.
Outside of that, which is fee funded, are any of these including any of the new positions that we were previously talking about, or have all been taken
Only the
out?
3 EMTs.
Excuse me?
Only the 3 EMTs are in the budget.
Okay. Everything else has been eliminated at this point?
It's been
Yes.
set aside. Yes.
Right, we've pulled those out as things to talk about, Rick. So we'll take each one of those up if people want to offer those as amendments to put them back in the budget based on the picture we get, once the state finalizes its budget.
Yep.
But right now, the only new positions that are included in this budget are the EMTs at the fire department, and those actually make us money.
Yep. No, I get that. I thought that we didn't. Just by the looks of the numbers, We weren't including the other positions. And we are, just for a point of clarification for the public, we are still a flat tax rate right now, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I want somebody to say that out loud, so.
Yes, we are flat. I mean, that was our goal going into this when we started this process in end of January. I mean, we went right to it.
Yep.
And I had asked all of you, what is the main concern? And most people said we'd like to be at zero. Well, we needed some other stuff, and we found some ways to fund those things. We found ways to do 10 times as many roads as we've ever done, and we're still zero. So I'm happy about the work that we've done. We're a little slow to get here. We're waiting on the state, but this is a budget that includes zero COVID money, zero extra if we go to 5%. That all comes next year. We can't rely on that yet. Go ahead, Eric.
Can I just clarify before we get to other councilors' questions? The intergovernmental revenue comes from funding we get from the state for roads that they're partly responsible for. It comes from the homestead reimbursement. It comes from the veterans exemptions reimbursement. It comes from the Betty reimbursement. The Betty reimbursement is people pay personal property taxes. Businesses pay personal property taxes on their equipment and other things that they have to run their business. And the state, actually, I think there's some sort of an exemption from that, and the state reimburses us for some of that money.
That's correct.
And then also the first part reimbursement would be part of that as well. And then the other question was the other non-operating revenue. I'll dig that up if we want to just go ahead and let other people chime in.
Councilor Kleepak, you had your hand up.
Well, along with Rick's question, I wanted to know, so there are no other positions that we had been considering previously, other than the EMT one, like none of that is in here.
Absolutely none of them.
What about some of that other stuff that we have been considering, like all the NGO funding stuff?
So you'll be able to vote on that and add those as amendments to the budget.
No.
What?
No.
The funding for the Growth Council and the funding that we already voted on for Waterville Creates for KV Cap.
Oh, that's already done.
Those are included in here. And those are paid for with TIF funds. So
Right.
pulling them out of the budget wouldn't really change. It would just mean that money goes in the bank instead of paying for those things.
Okay.
If you look in the TIF revenue column, it's the $100,000 in the top section. That's what Eric is referring to, and what you were asking about, Tom.
Yeah.
But code enforcement, assistant city manager, none of those are in this budget. Those are all things, if you want, you'll have to add. Anyone else? I don't see none.
Councilor Green has her hand raised, and so does Councilor Frankie.
I'm not seeing her hand. Go ahead, Councilor Green. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Just a couple clarifying questions. What percentage of the fund balance is 750,000?
Roughly 12%.
Okay. And when you were talking about the $650,000 as a rollover fund or rollover, are you saying that goes back into the unassigned fund balance?
That's correct. It's 600,000.
Okay.
And that's the unanticipated state revenue sharing
Right.
amount.
Okay. So I also heard Mayor Coelho say that we're not including the 5%. Of course, we don't get to 5% until 2023, right? So, but this budget includes the amount of revenue sharing that would be in the budget if it gets voted on tomorrow.
No.
No.
No?
This budget includes revenue sharing funded at 3.75%. And what the state is voting on tomorrow is upping that, I believe, for this budget year to 4.5%.
Okay.
So there's 0.75% in revenue sharing that we could possibly get that is not in this budget at the moment.
Okay.
What is that in real dollars?
I thought that's why we were waiting till the state voted to finalize our budget.
We are waiting because we need to know what our revenues are, and that really has more to do with the discussion about these other positions that we may or may not add. You know, if they up it to the 4.5%, then obviously we have a lot more funds available to us, and then it's a discussion for the council whether we use some of those dollars to fund these positions that we've been talking about. But at the moment, the revenue sharing number that is in this budget is based on 3.75%, which is the current law. So we have not upped that number to reflect what the state may or may not do, because obviously they haven't voted on it yet.
And that's 3.75% of the state's, some bundling of state revenues, and we don't know what that number is.
Okay. So, all right. So potentially we could be discussing these positions again in a week. Yeah.
Yes.
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 I think either way we're going to discuss them.
Right.
You know, the question is where, if we wanted to fund them, where would the money come from?
Right.
You know, do we want to fund them if they increase the revenue sharing? You know, that's a discussion once that's a reality, I think.
Yeah. And of course, I mean, this is, the revenue sharing is going up if it passes until 2023, and then we don't really have any guarantees after that, right? So
That is correct. That's sort of why we're
It's
trying
a
to do it with
political-
all conservative
Okay.
numbers.
Political football, I think they call that.
right.
That's what it is.
So, I just had one other question about, right now anyway, about the economic development pieces in the TIF fund, on the TIF fund sheet. Because it looks like it shows up in a couple different places, and I'm looking at the description column all the way to the right.
I'm going to share that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
There it is. Okay. And the description column is here.
Okay. I'm not seeing it, but I can see it on my own screen. So under the downtown TIF, the city economic development staff costs
Yes.
and support for economic development agencies.
Yes.
So that's all told, that's about $400,000.
It's in the red outlined column. It's $420,000.
Okay, great. So what are those costs? How do they tie back to the things we've talked about in the budget?
If you look down below on the second page, there's a list of all the costs that add up into those totals. And the
Okay.
the 172 is, I don't remember which numbers they are.
Okay, I didn't see the second page, so.
Yeah, it's all there, and the 478 total on that column matches the 478 here.
Mm-hmm.
In the distribution. Go ahead.
I guess I'm just confused about it on the downtown TIF, it says city economic development staff costs, and then it also says the same thing under the city center TIF. And that looks like that's a total of $225,000. So I just wasn't sure what those numbers.
Oh, that had to do with the amount of money available in the different TIFs. And the cost, the total of $478,000 exceeded the amount of money available in any single TIF. So we had to spread it across several TIFs.
I believe, Rebecca, if you look down below, it says distribution of economic development allocated staff costs, and that totals $427,000. That's
Yeah.
being paid for partly out of the downtown TIF, and then partly out of the city center TIF. So the two numbers that are funding city, anything that
Okay.
earmarks for city economic development staff should add up to that total, up to that number.
But these are the positions that we took out of the budget.
No.
No.
So the things we're funding in the city staff with TIF dollars are 55% of the city manager's budget, our city manager's salary and benefits, 30% of the finance director, 30% of the assessor, 20% of the assistant city manager if it went back in. But right now that's out.
Right. Okay.
100% of the city engineer, who we used to call the engineering department the economic development department.
Okay. Got it. Okay, I see. Thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else got a hand up? I can't see everybody.
Claude.
Also, Frankie has his hand up.
Councillor Frankie.
Okay, just a quick question and then a couple of comments. The question that I have is the gross tax levy on this sheet is 19,080,739. That's a different number than was listed in the original proposed budget. Is that number what the tax assessor has come up with, will be the actual number that we'll collect next year?
Yes. That's his best estimate of what the property assessed value is going to be next year, multiplied by the 2576 mill rate.
It's important to remember, Claude, that includes TIF revenues as well.
Yes.
The tax levy produces TIF revenues, which are included in that 19 million. And then we have to transfer some of those funds into an account for TIF that can only be used for that. And of course, some of it has to go back to the developer in a credit enhancement agreement.
Yes, exactly. My question then is that appears to be about a $400,000 increase in tax revenue over last year. Is that correct?
Yes, and I think that would largely be, a lot of that would be accounted for with the Colby Hotel.
Yes.
Good. Okay, so that's good. Let's see. My comment then was the way you've laid it out here, Steve, I think makes it a little easier to understand particularly how the TIF funding, since it's pulled out of the original tax levy, then gets reallocated to spend different ways. As far as I'm concerned, it's much clearer to understand than it was last year. Let's see, my other comment was that I really think that the Finance Committee has done an excellent job of working through this, through all of the having a new city manager, a new system of figuring things out. You guys are to be commended, even though we are down to the final bell here. but it looks like things are actually working the way they're supposed to work. Thank you.
Thanks, Cliff. Anybody else? Patty, I don't see any hands. Are there any participants? Let's see.
Council Thomas.
Me, Jay.
Oh, go ahead, buddy. Eric Thomas.
Well, so I just wanted to summarize, because I know it looks like the budget is up a lot. So I just wanted to sort of summarize what's driving the increase in expenses. One of the things that I have done over the last couple of weeks is really gone through the nitty gritty line by line of the budget. So just a summary of the things that are driving the increase in costs. Of course, we have the 53rd payroll week, which is $187,000. We have our normal staff raises, which I'm just estimating this. Don't go to the bank on this number, but I think that's around our payroll and benefits is up around $300,000 over last year. And of course, that's, contracted raises that we have built in with all the unions. The debt service is up $250,000 because the bond that we put out last year came, the payment is actually due starting this year. Last year we had just paid interest and fees. The payment on some of the other bonds has dropped off a little. So that number is up $215,000. The county tax is up $35,000. Steve has $35,000 in here to rent a space for council meetings, which is obviously a necessary expense. The pool, last year the pool was closed. Because the pool is open, we have a $140,000 expense that was not in last year's budget. That, of course, is offset somewhat by revenues. I believe the revenue line item for that is $75,000. But if we're just looking at the expense side, you've got $140,000 in expense from the pool that wasn't there last year. Quarry Road, which is pass-through money, there's an increase in $23,000 in their budget, which is completely offset by revenues on the other side. Police vehicles, I think we're looking at buying 4 police vehicles this year. Normally we would buy 2, and I think last year we might have only bought 1. So that line item is up by, or it was up by $62,000. That's actually something we have moved into a potential bond, is all of the vehicles. And then the emergency housing line for health and welfare is up $145,000 over the budgeted number last year. And obviously that was largely driven by COVID. That is also offset. We get reimbursed for 70% of those expenses. So I know it looks like the budget is up a lot, but most of those things are not new spending. They're things that were sort of built into our budget already. The only real new spending that's in here at the moment is the $100,000 for the Growth Council, which is being paid for 100% by TIF dollars that we already have in the bank. $100,000 for the nonprofits, $50,000 of which has already been allocated and $50,000 of which is still available to be allocated. Also mostly being funded with TIF dollars. And then of course the EMS positions, I think once you figure it all out, I think that was a net cost of another $400,000, but it's offset by $480,000 in revenue. So I know it looks like spending is up a lot, but that's not because we're all of a sudden spending a bunch of money on pet projects or anything. It's because of structural things in the budget that have happened between the last year and this year. You're muted, Jay.
I was just saying, there's a lot of good in this budget. It's not perfect. There's things that we can always tweak or figure out, but this is a long time coming. It's been pretty good. Anyone else? Claude.
Just one final comment. We're going to still talk about adding new positions possibly in the next couple of meetings. And I want to caution folks that any new position we add is going to be a position that will be in budget after budget after budget. So these are things that we have to be careful, make sure that we're not going to set us up to in a position where we're having to take rob Peter to pay Paul, take money out of the surplus and that kind of thing. We're moving in a good direction here, and hopefully the mayor's economic development program will kick into gear in the next couple of years, and it will be a lot easier to do city budgeting. Thank you.
Go ahead, Eric.
Just to summarize the revenues that are still possibly sitting out there, if the state funds revenue sharing at 4.5%, by rough math, I think that would mean somewhere in the neighborhood of $540,000 for us in this upcoming budget. If the state is also talking about increasing the homestead reimbursement from 70% to 100%, that would mean somewhere near $250,000 for us in this upcoming budget year, which is not currently built into this budget. There's 1.6 million in the CARES Act money that we're still waiting to receive that is not currently built into this budget. So we have somewhere in the neighborhood of close to $2.5 million in funding that could be coming in that is nowhere in this budget at the moment.
Councillor Green. I see the little blue hand.
So, regarding the CARES funding, which we potentially could receive, how would we get that funding, and what would it be for?
There will be certain restrictions put on that funding. One of them is for lost revenue, and we do have some areas where we could claim lost revenue. Part of it also has to do with premium payments made or to be made to city staff for working during the COVID period. And those are the only two that I'm aware of.
We're just waiting for that money to be dispersed.
Eric, Rebecca's still going.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we're just waiting for that money to be dispersed. It is coming to us. It just hasn't gone out into our hands yet.
But are there restrictions on how it's spent?
Yes.
Yes. We just don't know what they are yet.
It sounded pretty loose to me. We haven't been able to get a lot of definitive answers, but one of the things it can be used for is to make up for lost revenue. And how do you really, like, for example, last year, we may have raised the mill rate if we weren't in the middle of a pandemic. So, we'll see exactly how, how much they're going to cross their T's and dot their I's when they go looking for how that money's spent.
Okay. So the amount that we receive would be based on projected lost revenue?
No. I think I believe we're receiving $1.6 million. That's the number we've heard. And it has nothing to do with anything. It has to do with how much money was sent to the state and a spreadsheet that they have based on a formula that they were given.
Okay, and I do have one other question, though I know other people have their hands up, but I wonder if someone could just speak to the bonding that we're doing this year.
So,
yeah, how much and what's it for?
I think it's going to be just shy of $5 million or at $5 million. A lot of that is going to go to infrastructure repairs. At one point, we were paying $250,000 a year for road maintenance, which $250,000 isn't going anywhere. But we do know that a $5 million loan is $325. Am I correct on that, Steve?
$334 in the first year.
So for essentially another $75,000 to $80,000, and towards that, we can do a lot more roads and some other infrastructure now.
The first year payment that I just mentioned won't hit us until fiscal 23.
Yep.
Right. We're going to see a little peak in our debt service next year, but then if the city sticks with sort of the 20-year plan that we saw in a previous version of the budget, that should even out. After next year, it'll drop, and then we'll try to keep that consistent over time.
Yeah. So the amounts of the bonds over time may vary.
Right, but you also mentioned moving police cruisers into the bonding, and I wondered if there are other capital expenses like that.
The entire capital plan has been moved into the bonding for consideration. I believe it's somewhere in the range of, let me look it up.
The only thing we had in the budget for capital improvements was $250,000 for paving, which was being paid for with the gas pipeline TIF money.
Okay.
And so what we've decided to do is try to speed up that timeline rather than spending $250,000 a year and getting one or two roads done. I think it makes more sense to borrow a sizable amount of money, try to get 4 or 5 years worth of work done in, the span of 2 years, and then use the money from the gas pipeline to pay the debt service rather than funding it year to year. So that's the only things that were in the budget before that got moved into a bond were the $250,000 annual paving budget and $100,000 for police cruisers.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Frankie.
And am I correct in understanding that we're going to try to allocate more of the TIF money in the future toward debt service as long as the things we're doing like repaving roads is stuff that lends itself to the economic development theme?
You are correct, Claude.
And so just to the bond would have 1.8 million for roads outside of the downtown. I think there was 1.1 in here originally for downtown, although Steve and I have been talking about that. I think those monies would be better spent elsewhere in the short term. There's a lot of work already happening in the downtown, and we may run into, because the build grant is happening, we don't want there to be any gray area between what is a build grant project and what is our project, because then we get into having to pay prevailing wages with the unions, with the work going on, the federal work going on. So I think we might look at the 1.1 that's currently in the bond for downtown streets and sidewalks and look at spending that elsewhere in town.
South and North End, people. South and North End. Councilor Foss.
Why wouldn't we take the 3 cruisers out of the revenue sharing where that's the capital improvement, and we're going to roll those cars back out of there in about 4 to 5 years, but yet continue to pay on the bond for those same cruisers? And better. And I'm not saying that the bond shouldn't be the level it is. I'm saying that why not? If we're going to go to 4.5%, again, they got to vote on it tomorrow. Okay, so it is what it is. Why not take those cruisers out of there? It'd be like me buying a truck at $40,000, making it a 20-year note, and then knowing in 5 years I'm going to have to roll this thing over to another car, and I'm still paying for the original car.
Well, for one thing, Rick, the bonding agencies will not let us do that. If a piece of there's a lifespan assigned to a piece of equipment when you buy it, and they make you pay it off within that perceived lifespan. So you would have to ask the chief exactly how long we get out of the police vehicle. But if it's only 5, it's not like when you borrow money in a bond, it's not just one amount that you pay off over a certain amount of time. there's like several different parts of it. So things for equipment that only lasts 5 years, you have to pay those things off over 5 years. Things for a road that's projected to last 10 years, they give you 10 years to pay that part of the bond off.
Okay.
So,
Steve, can I get a breakdown of that coming into the next meeting?
Breakdown in what way?
On the bond, what that's going to look like?
I'll share with you what we have. At this point, we only have an estimate of the payments, but I'll see if it's detailed.
Okay, thank you.
A lot of that's going to be left up to you guys. Just like Rebecca was saying about the 1.6 million, you're going to have a lot of input on how to spend that going forward. We don't know what it is.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, Jay. I'm not opposed to it if we spent, just throwing a number out there, $150,000 for 4 cars, and those cars are paid off in the bond in 5 years, or however long Chief is going to have them before he rolls them back out of there. That's all fine and good. But if I'm paying a quarter or 3/4% on $150,000 for 10 years, and he's rolling those cars back out in 6 years because they're spent. Okay,
Yep.
well, that's where my little brain is.
I get it. We don't want to pay the interest on the extra 2 years. We're not going to use it.
Right, exactly.
I'm with you. Councilor Frankie.
Just as a matter of interest, do we have a schedule for how we're considering the issuing bonds this year? I mean, we've got a schedule for the budget, but and we've included some things in the budget that have to do with bonds. What's our timeline for the bond discussion?
Sometime after September.
I think we would have to have the discussion about the bond sooner rather than later because, for example, some of these things we're going to, the police vehicles and the paving stuff, we would probably pay for in anticipation of receiving bond funds.
Correct.
And so obviously we wouldn't want to do that and then later decide we don't want to borrow the money. So that is probably going to be, I sort of wanted these things to happen concurrently with the budget. I'm not sure that's going to happen at this point because I don't know that we have the detail on the bonds to be able to vote on it yet. But that's probably the first thing we're going to have to take up when the budget is done, is the bonding issue. And we can vote on that, as soon as the budget is over, and then we can wait to go out to actually borrow the money until the fall. And that'll partly, I think, depend on where we see the market going. I don't think interest rates really can't go any lower. I don't necessarily see them going up anytime soon either. But that's probably not something we want to wait on for too long because interest rates can change over time.
If I recall, Eric, that's what we did last year, wasn't it? That we approved the bonding shortly after we did the budget, and then they actually didn't issue the bonds until the fall.
Yep, I think that was exactly what happened last year.
Anyone else? I see none.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I think I just heard it.
I think so too.
Yes,
Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Right.